And Lisa, thank you so much for coming in. You saw there the comments from Becky Cele, a pledge against crimes committed against women and children and vulnerable groups as part of their men's mobilization awareness campaign within the SAPS. Of course, any campaign to raise awareness of this kind must be applauded, but it taking place within the SAPS, some might say, isn't this part of your job in the first place?
Well, absolutely, and I think the police have run more than enough campaigns by now. If they aren't adequately trained to know what their job is, then that's a real problem. So I think it would be more useful if the Minister and the Commissioner and other senior management of the police looked at the very well documented problems that are in the police that they get told about time and time again, and rather focused on taking steps against those rather than having a march. Because a march, it's nice, it's symbolic, but it doesn't actually ensure that, it doesn't improve police investigation skills, it doesn't close open cases, it doesn't address the complaints against the police in relation to the Domestic Violence Act.
Now, as part of this campaign, we've heard that the SAPS's top management has had a 3-day workshop to brainstorm measures to decrease high crime levels as well as to stop the scourge of gender-based violence. Is this an SAPS that's run out of ideas?
I think it's an SAPS that's forgotten what to implement what is already in place and is trying to look at new ideas when really they're not doing what they should be doing. And there are a couple of real basics they can do. Every 6 months they're supposed to give to Parliament a report on the number of cases of misconduct laid against their officers in relation to the Domestic Violence Act. This year there have been no reports presented to Parliament. We need to ask why that has happened. I think the second thing we need to ask is that every 6 months when those reports are presented, we never hear what happened. We don't hear what the consequences are. We don't hear how the police are taking steps to improve the many ways that their stations don't meet the Domestic Violence Act's instructions. They could be going to do that. They could be telling us how many of their officers are being investigated for rape and have been charged with rape. They could be telling us what they're doing about domestic violence by police officers, as well as we've seen recently, cases where police officers have killed their female partners. So those are concrete problems which they've known about for well over 2 decades. We see no movement around those, but we have marches, which, yes, they're nice, they're symbolic, but they don't change those problems.
So the main point you're making there is that information is key, and the information is there, but it's not being used in the correct way to try and find solutions.
Absolutely. We get these performances rather than, and I mean, it's not very glamorous to sit and go and check a domestic violence register, for example. It doesn't give good TV like a march does. But that's the kind of stuff that needs to happen. And there need to be consequences. So we have provinces which are not adhering to the Domestic Violence Act, but you don't see the provincial commissioner of that province being asked to account for why he or she is not implementing the legislation. So I would like to see a few more consequences as well against individual officers, because I think if you saw consequences, then we might see things change a bit.
What about basic training of our police officers? Obviously, the police officers have different jobs, they work in different departments, but we have been hearing this, and I've heard you speak about this probably for 2 decades already, about the experience of a woman or child going into a police station to report potential or alleged gender-based violence. And we've heard horror stories about how people are treated, and we now also know there is proof that shows that this has had an impact on the low reportage of these cases. Is this basic training taking place so that our police officers know how to treat citizens who come in to report gender-based violence or crimes of some kind?
It would appear to be part of their basic training, but I don't think it's very effective if we're still seeing these kinds of problems. And also, that's at the level of basic training. There needs to be regular refresher, top-up courses, because those are officers who've had no experience yet of policing. So you're teaching them without them knowing firsthand what the reality of this will be. So there needs to be regular, ongoing training as they develop their skills. But I think it's obviously not effective because they often don't seem to know what the law is. And then there's a second problem, which is the culture at individual stations. You can see that in some stations, police officers do what they do. It's very apparent from some of the research we've done. But then you have stations where they don't. And there, that's due to the culture of command that's going in at that station. So I think it's also important that the police start identifying the problem stations and looking at management there and addressing the problems at management level.
Because that has a huge impact, not just psychologically on victims that come to the police station as their first port of call. It also has an impact further down the road when a case of some kind that has been reported would eventually have to end up in court when the victim seeks justice. And that has an impact on that as well.
Well, exactly. So there's two different kinds of trainings we need. We need training for the uniform branch, which are the officers who receive the complaints, but we need training for detectives. You can see that a number of cases are weak. They fall between the cracks. We see cases of men who've been accused of murdering their female partners being released on bail despite histories of domestic violence. That's a problem with the actual investigation of matters. And it's very apparent in rape, for instance. The cases where you're least likely to see an arrest is where there's been a stranger. And that tells you there's a problem with the skills in investigating stranger rapes. So I think we need to look at what's happening to the uniform officers, but also the detectives. And then I think we need to see some kind of consequence management for those managers who don't ensure that they are implementing what the law says they must do at station level.
And that's before we even speak about the high number of cases that actually involve police members themselves. And we've seen far too many tragic stories involving police men who are off duty and a gun is involved and there's a domestic violence of some kind that comes because of pressure that they're under or whatever mental illness they might be suffering with. But that is a conversation for another day. Thank you so much, as always. Research Associate at Wits University, Lisa Vetten. Always great to get your insight on these matters. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Marcel.